Hi, again, I'm Sandy Oliver, and I'm going to be looking at the second half, what I call 3B, in Chapter 3 in Lewis Vaughn's The Power of Critical Thinking. And mostly this time we're going to be talking about different ways we categorize or diagram arguments. And the first part is fairly easy, a little bit about patterns that we find valid all the time. Okay, if you know these, you know that anything that doesn't look like these is invalid. Okay, and we're going to learn about diagramming arguments. We're not talking like diagramming sentences, so don't sweat or get too excited. Depending. This is a 5-step process, and we're going to look at the difference between dependent premises and independent premises. And then the last thing we're going to do is look at the last section for this chapter on assessing longer arguments, kind of looking at how do you do that for bigger pieces. We're starting after 3.4 exercise, so on page 84 and going into 104. There's a little bit of exercise in there. Can I break that up? But pretty much, there you go. Another 20 pages to chop up. And so just a reminder, a deductive argument is one that intends to provide conclusive support for its conclusion. Okay, so if the premises are true, then the conclusion has to be true. Okay, and that's what we're going to work with in this argument pattern section. And since argument forms are structures distinct from content, this is the hard part for a lot of folks. We're looking at structure, and we can easily signify different forms by using letters to represent statements, and use the same letter for the same statement all the time. Okay, that's a big deal. Okay, so one of the things here on page 84 says, if the job is worth doing, then it's worth doing well. That's the first premise. The second premise, the job is worth doing. The conclusion, therefore, it's worth doing well. Okay, this is a very typical argument format. Now, normally when we see these in the wild, out and about, it's going to have more stuff with it than just this. But for now, we can look at things this way and go, oh, I can see that pattern. Oh, I can see that pattern. And a lot of times our deductive arguments will use 2 or 3 of these different formats to kind of get the point across. So it's okay. If we're looking at this, and I'm going to kind of mark this up a bit. So my normal one is, if there's chocolate in the house, then I am happy. Okay, this is my first premise, P1. My second premise, there's chocolate in the house. My husband's very good at making sure there's always chocolate in the house. Okay, and then my conclusion, so I am happy. Okay, that's my little argument. Now, when we're looking at labeling the argument and getting our variables, okay, let me give you a couple things over here. Variables are letters that represent phrasing or whatever. Parts of premises. Okay. Normally, when we're doing logic like this, we start out and we use P and Q, and then if we need a third one, we use R. Now, you can use lots more variables than this, okay? But you get a good enough kind of work out with them if you use 3, okay? And that's all we're going to get to pretty much in the whole course. So anyway, P and Q and R. So what you do is you look at your argument in the way it's written, okay? Always identify your conclusion first, therefore, so, that kind of stuff, okay? Make it easy for you, okay? So there's my conclusion, okay? So first premise, if there's chocolate in the house, then I'm happy. You'll notice this and this, if, then, okay? That is called a conditional statement. Okay? So if the first part is true, then the second part is true. Okay, that's kind of how you have to think about conditional. The if portion is called the antecedent. Comes before. That's all that means. Okay, antecedent comes before. The then is the consequent. Okay, what happens as a result of? Okay, if there's chocolate in the house, okay, I am happy. That's my if then, that's my conditional. Okay, and so in logic we use conditionals all the time. Some arguments are made up totally of conditionals. We'll get to those in a minute. So if there's chocolate in the house, okay, and I'm going to see if I have things that are going to give me different, there we go. I'm going to have to use my red. Go on, get another one. Okay, so there's chocolate in the house is the first phrase I come to, okay? We're going to always label that first one P. Okay? Then, anywhere else in the argument that has that same phrase, or has a phrase that means the same thing, we're also going to call that P. So there's chocolate in the house. That's a P. Okay? There's no more of that particular phrasing, so we're done. The second phrasing I come to, I'm always going to label Q. Okay? So in this case, I am happy is Q. And just in case, there we go, we're going to do it like that. Okay, so 2 lines, or teal, is Q. 1 line, or red, is P. Okay, so I have another piece here. I'm happy, shows up again. Okay, and it doesn't matter if you use capital letters or lowercase letters or whatever. I just like to make sure I can tell them apart. Okay, so if I'm going to put this into kind of a standardized format, I'm going to use the variables. I'm going to use those letters because it shorthands them. Okay, it makes it easier to work with. Okay, if there's chocolate in the house, I am happy. Okay, so if P, then Q. Okay, still premise 1, same thing. Premise 2 is just P. No accoutrement, no things hanging around, just P. Okay, my conclusion then, so, is just Q. See how much faster that is and smaller that is, but it doesn't lose any of the structure, because that's what we're looking at right now. Okay, remember, content is separate from structure. Okay, content implies structure, but it's not the same thing. Okay, so this particular structure is called a modus ponens. Now, Dr. Vaughn does something in the book that always cracks me up. He says, here's this little Latin phrase, don't worry about it, and then that's what we use in the whole rest of the book. Okay? You can label it MP. Okay? This is what we also call confirming the antecedent. Okay? We say, if there's chocolate in the house, then I am happy. This is the antecedent. Okay, right? So if I then say for my second premises, oh, by the way, there really is chocolate in the house. I'm confirming that that conditional is actually true, okay? So I'm confirming, or affirming, what does he use? Affirming, sorry. And you know I don't edit these things, so I have to go back through and edit as I go. Affirming the antecedent, okay? It always looks like this. And it's always valid. Okay. In other words, this structure works. Now, when we get to chapter 7, you're going to see why this structure works. Okay, but right now, just know this works. Okay, this is valid. All of my pieces are in the right spot. The structure works. Okay. Now, if I want to see if this is sound, I have to ask the question. Okay. There's chocolate in the house. Am I really happy? Well, in that sense, yes. 30 seconds of bliss, as my husband would say. Okay, modus ponens. Okay, I'm going to change, I'm going to leave my same antecedent there, my same, my same conditional. I'm going to change some things. Okay, come back to the purple pen. Okay. Premise 2, in this case, says, I am not happy. And my conclusion then would be, there's no chocolate in the house. Okay. Go back and do my pieces here. Okay. Chocolate in the house. Okay, so there's no chocolate in the house. The no, the negative, does not change your variable, but it changes its direction. We're going to get to that in a minute too. So this is a not P. Okay, because we have no. That's important to note. Always note the not. And the I am not happy is the same phrase as the Q here, but it's a not Q. Okay? This is how we limit our number of variables. Okay? We don't want 4 variables, especially when they're not really different. They're just the opposite side. Okay? So if I write this out, I still have if P, then Q. But my second one is not Q. So, not P. Okay? Shortened it down, gave it shorthand. It's the same argument. If P, then Q. Not Q, therefore not P. Okay? In this one, I should have done that with a different color, but I think you're okay with that. This one is called modus tollens. And again, he says, nice little Latin, don't worry about it, and then uses it all the time. This is denying the consequent. Okay? It's also always valid. Okay, so if P then Q starts both of our modus guys here, and then we change what we do. In modus ponens, we affirm the antecedent. We're affirming the if clause, right? If there's chocolate in the house, then I'm happy. There's chocolate in the house, so I'm happy. In the modus tollens, we're denying the consequent, okay? We're denying the second statement. Please don't mess these up or smush them in your head, because then you get an invalid argument, okay? So modus tollens, MT, is denying the consequent. We take the then statement and say no to it. which means we also have to say no to the antecedent. So there's no chocolate in the house. Always sad. Always valid in structure. Okay, remember, valid and invalid refers to structure. Okay, not truth. Although, might be the case. Okay, not so bad. I have a couple more valid argument patterns, but I'm going to leave that one up there. Okay. The third one that uses this conditional to start is called a hypothetical syllogism. Okay, don't let that get all in your head here and mess you up. Okay. A syllogism just means 3 statements in an argument. Wow. I'm not sure. Yeah, anyway. So we have, this is a 3-statement argument. Okay, so what we just did was a syllogism, right? Okay. In this, the hypothetical syllogism has 3 conditionals. So if, then, so, if, then. Okay. And I'm going to show you on this one. Okay, so if there's chocolate in the house, I'm happy. My second premise would be if I am happy, then I will make dinner. Another reason my husband keeps chocolate in the house. Okay? So my conclusion then, okay, so if there's chocolate in the house, then I will make dinner. Okay? That is what we call a hypothetical syllogism. Okay, 3 conditional statements. This particular structure then is also important. Okay, so I'm going to go through and do my markup. I am happy is a Q. Okay. I have down here, I have another P statement. If there's chocolate in the house, not the part, just the theirs. That's a P, right? No knots. Oh, let's use the green one. Okay. I will make dinner is a new phrase, right? So I need my new, I'm going to make him a very, very straight line, okay, as opposed to 3 because I don't have space for that. Here as well, I will make dinner, okay, very straight, green line, I'll make dinner. Okay, so in this way, we have then if P, then Q. If Q, then R. So if P, then R. And this is very similar to stuff you've had in algebra, right? If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, right? Same idea here. This structure, this particular structure is always valid, okay? This particular structure is always valid. So if it works this way, then we have a valid argument, okay? Is it true? Probably. Well, it's deductive, so it has to be true. if I go through my premises, okay, this one's true, this one's true, so my conclusion must be true, right? It's a deductive argument. So if somebody messes up this order, or if they use the same syllogism, if they use the same conditional twice, okay, they make a mess with it. So always look for this particular structure. Okay, if P then Q, if Q then R, so if P then R. Now, if the variables like this seem a little too abstract for you, I mean, what's an R, right? You can turn them into actual nouns. Okay, I like color, so I use my P's are red, my Q's are teal, and my R's are green. Okay, maybe color doesn't help you all that much, but you like concrete things, okay? So turn your P into penguins. Then turn your Q into quail and your R into rabbits, okay? If we have penguins, then we have quail. If we have quail, then we have rabbits. So if we have penguins, then we have rabbits. Whatever works to help you streamline and see the relationships here in the structure, that works. Okay, color, letters, nouns, combination of the three, 2 out of 3. Okay, so this is always valid. If P then Q, if Q then R, so if P then R. Okay. Things to look for in other arguments. Okay. Make sure that you have the same letter, the same phrasing, only twice in the 6 possibilities here, okay? 2 Q's, 2 P's, 2 R's. If you have 3 Q's, somebody's losing out and it's not a valid argument, okay? Not too horrible. Okay. Now I can get rid of conditional and such, because we're going to talk about one more type of valid argument structure. When I say valid, I always mean deductive. Now, I lost my eraser, so I'm using tissue. It works okay, but okay. The last form, and this is on, I believe, page 88. Yes. This is not a conditional, okay? This is a disjunctive, disjunction, okay? Basically, it's a syllogism that offers a choice. Okay, we see either or. Okay, sometimes we don't do the either. Okay, we're lazy talkers, that's just how we are. And it's going to look like this, okay? So I'm going to use all the pieces. Either we watch a movie, or we play Uno. I like it, okay? Either we watch a movie or we play Uno. This is my first premise, and it's a disjunction, okay? So since this is a syllogism, we're going to have three parts, okay? So part 2, premise 2, okay? We played Uno. So we did not watch a movie. Okay, we can do one or the other. We can have one or the other. We can be one or the other, but we cannot be both. Okay, not in this particular style. Okay, so here's my indicator words here, either or. Now, if we said we can watch a movie or we can play Uno, that's still a disjunctive syllogism. And okay, it still works. So, yeah, we're gonna do this. Okay, so again, I'm going to use my same rules, and the first phrasing I see is we watch a movie. Okay, so that's my P. And then I go down and I see, oh, here's the other one. Okay, so this is a not P. Let's see if this is enough contrast. Okay, we play Uno. That's my other phrasing. Okay, here, play Uno. Okay, so I have P or Q, Q, so not P. There's my structure. Okay. Now, the fun part with a disjunctive syllogism it has 4 possibilities, and all of them are valid. Okay, so you see here, right? Either we watch a movie or we play Uno. We played Uno, okay, my cue, so we did not watch a movie. So this particular one is, they all start out P or Q, and then what we do here and here has 4 possibilities, okay? So if I'm doing the positive, P or Q, P, in this case we watched a movie, so not Q. One of these has to be yes, and one of these has to be no. That's, we have a choice, right? Okay, so here Q, so not P, here P, so not Q. Now, we also have the possibility of putting the not in the second piece. Okay, so we always start out P or Q. So not Q, we are not playing Uno. Thank you very much. So P. Okay. Too discouraged here. So we always start out P or Q, and then what we do with our choices can shift without being invalid. So, okay, the last one always again starts out P or Q. Okay, our negative here, not P. We are not watching a movie. We don't have that kind of time. So Q. Okay, so you have 4 possibilities. Any one of these 4 is valid. All of these are valid. Okay, all the time. So not too horrible. A little weird, but not too horrible. There's a review notes box for that on page 88. There's a review notes for valid argument forms here on page 86. And then there are a couple of invalid argument forms. Okay, if you're going to look at those, make sure you're very, very, very careful how you put them in your head so you don't get them confused. Okay, so we have our patterns, modus ponens, okay, affirming the antecedent, modus tollens, denying the consequent, hypothetical syllogism, if P then Q, if Q then R, if P then R, okay? And then our disjunctive syllogism, which has 4 possibilities, but they all start out the same way, P or Q. Q, so not P, not Q, so P, P, so not Q, not P, so Q. Okay. It's weird, but it's okay. It works. Okay. That gets us to exercises 3.5, 6, and 7. And then we're going to look at diagramming arguments. I'm going to get rid of some of this, well, pretty much all of this. One of the things that you know from reading, from being in the world for more than a day or two, there are arguments all over the place. And a lot of them may be very good arguments, but they have a lot of fluff. They have a lot of extraneous information. I like that word, extraneous. Really super extra, not important. And it may be important for the argument because nobody would understand it otherwise, but it's not important for the structure. Okay, that's kind of what we're trying to get at here, right? See this overlying theme, structure. I have to come in here with a cleaner and fix that. So we're going to look at the next section, which is diagramming arguments. And you look at things and you think, oh, my goodness, all these numbers and lines and such. But part of the reason we're doing this is so that, well, twofold. One, so you can see what the argument itself really is. Okay, there can be lots of extra information, things that we repeat, sometimes for emphasis, sometimes because we forget, sometimes because it just works better that way structurally or sound-wise and all that. But we're going to look at a couple of things here about diagramming. One is we diagram to see the relationships among the different statements. Okay. Now, the P's and Q's show us one kind of relationship among the statements, right? How they fit together, what their possibilities could be. But these are very simple arguments, 3 sentences, okay? I don't know about you, but I need 3 sentences to say hello most days. So, when you have longer arguments, so this is not even really super long arguments, it's like a paragraph, okay? And if you've never played Clue or you don't know what that game is, you're missing out. This is kind of fun. The example that Dr. Bond goes through is about Colonel Mustard is the murderer, okay? And in Clue, you have certain things you can do somebody else in, Mr. Body in, with, and there are lots of possibilities here. When we're looking at diagramming arguments, and you're going to look at page 94, the review notes. And I thought he would fix this in this edition. He did not. Diagramming arguments step by step. The first thing you have to do is to find out if they've given you any help with indicator words. Okay, well, maybe not. Yes. And it says underline, but you're going to underline something else later. So I say circle all the premise or conclusion indicator words, such as since, therefore, because, and then number the statements. Okay, that's 1 step. I guess you could 2 steps, but we like 5, so that's okay. Number the statements. Don't number things that are questions. Don't number things that are exclamations. Don't number fragments. Okay. Number the statements in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. Find the conclusion among all those statements and put a wavy line under it. Okay, that way it stands out from the rest. Now, if you're doing this on your computer, if you hold down the underline key, press whatever, click highlight, it's going to give you options for how to underline things, and you can make it different. Just make it different from what you do the premises. If you're hand doing it, wavy line works. Locate the premises and underline them. Now, that's going to have you make some judgments about the rest of the statements in this particular paragraph. Because if it's something that is an explanation, it's not really a premise. Okay, so you have to kind of be careful. Cross out all the extraneous stuff. Places where it's said again, places where it's exclamations like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it's taking so long for people to figure this out. Okay, that kind of stuff. Redundancies, irrelevant sentences, questions, exclamations. Okay, cross them out. What you'll have left is basically the skeleton of the argument. And then you're going to diagram. Okay, you're going to draw a diagram that looks like sort of a really abbreviated flow chart, if you know what those are. Okay, so at the bottom is whatever number your conclusion is. Okay, and sometimes it's the first sentence, sometimes it's the third sentence, sometimes it's the 10th sentence. It just depends. Okay, so whatever number that is goes to the bottom. And then you're going to set up the structure depending upon how the sentences, how the statements relate to the conclusion, and sometimes how they relate to each other. Okay, so you have something called a dependent or a dependent premise. Okay, it's one that relies on at least one other premise in order for it to be useful in the argument. And the thing about a dependent premise, okay, there's always two at least, sometimes there's more than that. If you take away the other part of the equation there, it's going to fall apart. It's not going to make sense, it's not going to work, it's not going to be useful. Okay, so a dependent premise, let's see if I actually wrote this down. There we go. Dependent premises, those that jointly provide support to a conclusion. Remove one and the other is undermined or completely canceled out. Okay? This is, it gets a little plus sign. Okay? So, DP number gets a plus sign in our diagram. An independent premise, probably easy to figure out. One that doesn't need anybody else. And if you pull out any other of the premises, this one's still fine. If you pull it out, the other independent premises and dependent premises are fine. Okay? So, if you're building a diagram and you have, say, two sets of dependent premises and an extra independent premise, you would have something that might look like this. 1 plus 2 leads to the conclusion directly. 5 plus 6 really leads to 7, which leads to the conclusion. And then sentence number 8, all by itself, just goes there. Okay? And so maybe the conclusion is number 4. Okay? So we've got two sets of dependent premises and two independent premises. This is just an intermediate version of the conclusion, basically. Okay? So, when we're diagramming an argument, usually it's a paragraph, okay? And so we're going to look at all the different pieces, okay? We're going to figure out if it gave us any help. Is there a so in this paragraph? Or a therefore? Because we are in luck. That's our conclusion. If there's not, then we know we have a little bit harder work to do. Number the statements from beginning to end, okay? When you have independent clauses, I know, English class a little bit, independent clauses that are put together in complex sentences, okay? So I have one independent clause here, an and another independent clause here, okay, with comma. those are two separate statements. Okay, so 1 and 2, not just one. Our if-thens are just one statement. Okay, so be careful. And the book goes through this pretty well. And he gives us a couple of really good examples here to play with. Okay. So we have our conclusion, our premises all mapped out. It's all good. Okay. So what happens if our argument is way longer than a paragraph, which happens to us a lot? Okay, long arguments require a little more work, and it's less than this. Well, it's 4 steps. Okay, and this is on page 101. There are some problems, some obstacles to overcome in a longer argument. Sometimes there's a lot of fluff. Sometimes only a small portion of the actual article or essay contains an argument. Okay. Some of the premises may be implicit. Remember, we talked about that earlier in part 3A about sometimes everybody understands a certain part of the argument, and so we don't have to talk about it. Okay. Or we've chosen to kind of cut it out of our argument. And of course, there are those that are intending or purporting to be arguments, and they're not really. Okay. So the steps for this: make sure you study the text. Okay, that's the first part. This is a little bit different from our paragraph, right? So study the text until you thoroughly understand it. Okay, best way to make sure you can do it, write a summary. Okay, take the argument, the whole paper, and boil it down to a paragraph. And then have somebody else read it and see if they can tell you, oh, well, this is about this and this and this. Okay, did you give them enough detail so that even though they haven't read the argument, they can understand what you're talking about? Okay, so once you study the text, okay, find the conclusion. Okay, don't skip the first step, or you will probably get it wrong as far as what the conclusion is. Okay, you might have to read something 2 or 3 times, and I know reading it once is a big thing, but 2 or 3 times. Find the conclusion. Okay, and then identify the premises. They may be very long and complex. You might have to boil them down a little bit, or they might just be a piece of a particular paragraph. Okay, and then diagram. Okay, think about how this works, and he gives us an example here in the case for discrimination. And the argument lays out on page 103 in 3 pieces. Okay, now it is 3 paragraphs. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that each paragraph gets a point. Sometimes it works that way, but not always. Another piece to this is that we also have sub-arguments. Our long, very complex article might actually look just like our paragraph did, only with lots and lots of things we could have crossed out. Okay. Argument 1, argument 2 leads to argument 4. Okay. Sub-arguments are also a possibility. The diagrams are okay, not too horrible, right? There are lots of keywords in this chapter on the bottom of page 106. Some of them will show up on the test. That, let's see, deductive argument and inductive argument are big words. The rest of them will show up on the matching, maybe. Okay, so make sure that you practice. I'm going to give you enough of exercises in 3B to practice. Make sure your reading log is at least a page. Shouldn't be too bad. I was going to tell you this the last time too. I have 10 pages of notes for chapter 3. This is why I'm breaking it into 2 parts for you, because I think we need to do all of this, and you need to understand all of this before we move into the more technical study, and so this will be helpful, I promise. So let me know if you have questions. You know you have my email. Hang in there. It's worth doing.